welcome to the Barcast, coming to you on a sunny Monday morning here in Brooklyn, New York. And we're finishing up the 9 today with the self-preservation 9. And this is actually the end of the Naranjo text. Remember that we started at the 4, so we're going to carry on and go all the way back to the beginning and carry on with the 1. But let's hear about the self-preservation 9, whose keyword is appetite. And I'll just caution that this for me is one of the least illuminating chapters of any of the subtypes, so we might have to do some extra work to really understand what is meant by appetite. So here's Naranjo. We will end with the 9 self-preservation, which Ichazo used the word appetite. It's obvious that these individuals tend to have larger bodies, so it is likely that they also have a larger appetite. Sancho Panza from the Quixote is a literal example of the self-preservation 9 type. And it's interesting that Cervantes used panza, which means belly, for his name, as it's something so central to this character. So right away, we're deviating from kind of the typical approach here in the sense that we're describing bodies and rather than interiors. So let's hold that with some caution. Let's consider the idea of a person who might say, quote, "I eat, therefore I am," end quote. Each of the types can be approached with this Cartesian expression. I think, therefore I am. A 6 might say, "I suffer, therefore I am," a 4 might say. These are actually very descriptive expressions of how each type experiences the void of their being. Take the example of the sexual 4, whose central issue is competitive hatred, and who goes around metaphorically cutting off heads. They might say, "I hate, therefore I am." This main trait of each subtype corresponds most to this equation of resolving the question of being through substitution or an illusion of being. So it's a really deep framing of the overall Enneagram, but we're just going to truck on. Human beings have all kinds of substitutes for being, an authentic frenzy of pacifiers. We have all sorts of pacifiers that give us the impression that this or that is what we were looking for. And we go astray because we chase after these illusions that promise us a sense of being where it is not. In the case of the self-preservation 9, there's an excessive resemblance to a small animal. It's not just "I eat, therefore I am," but also "I sleep, therefore I am," "I have, therefore I am," "I'm standing here, therefore I am." The ordinary facts of life have the capacity to block their awareness. For this type, there's no metaphysical level. In a way, the question of being has been erased from the life of a self-preservation 9. You cannot talk about being with Sancho Panza, there's only his belly. The substitution of the mother's breast with the bottle has been so complete that there is no memory of maternal love in their vocabulary. Thus, these self-preservation types are very loving people, but deep down they do not feel loved. Their resignation is their most prominent feature. And there's a kind of joy, a kind of tenderness that, nonetheless, is far from the full experience of love. As Erich Fromm says, to have or to be. For them, it is probably the same issue. In the world of big bankers, for example, you can see many friendly faces with double chins, very practical people. Here we have the Homo economicus. So that's Naranjo's introduction. I think it warrants some further discussion. So if you're familiar at all with the Buddhist cosmology, these 6 realms, what we're talking about is the animal realm. The realm of instinct, which goes beyond survival and into sort of comfort, creature comforts. Creature comforts seems to be core to the 9. And so with appetite, we need to be careful. We're not talking at all about the appetite of the 7, that gluttonous, overeating, overindulging quality. We're also not talking about the appetite of the 8, the lion, the 8 who wants to be satisfied, satisfaction. So that's why appetite is a tricky one, because it's so easy to slip into these other keywords and these other subtypes. It's pacification. So the whole project of the Enneagram personality types is pacification. Each of these passions, as Naranjo is describing here, are a pacifier of sorts to keep us from being concerned with the core question of being and working it out for ourselves. But the 9 is sort of all the pacifiers, the most pacifiery pacifier. There's a numbing, and I think it's a beautiful point, the substitution of the mother's breast with the bottle. It's sort of a very pure substitution. You know, when we read the 5, Naranjo describes the substitution of the mother's breast with books, right? So that's a pretty wild substitution that explains the five's hoarding of knowledge. But the nine is like substituting the mother's breast with milk. It's sort of like the most, again, we have this with the nine. It's sort of the sanest, the most natural, the least egoic substitution. And yet precisely because of its proximity to the real thing, it's sort of the most pernicious, the most insidious. What would you describe it? It's like it's hard to root out. It's hard to dig out. The nine's strategies are so effective that the very question of being becomes sort of unavailable to them. There's no metaphysical level, as Naranjo describes it. So we could call it appetite. But gosh, I'm thinking about the 8, which we just finished, and satisfaction. I think satisfaction is quite effective here too, right? That's what Sancho Panza wants. He wants his worldly concerns met. Now, Panza himself, I haven't read Quixote in its entirety, but the way I think of Sancho Panza is he's kind of irascible. He's a bit of a anti-intellectual. And I don't know if the 9 has that level of awareness. I think of the 9 as truly not even making an issue of its own desiring of its appetite to be satisfied. So how does this break down, and what's the path forward? We will turn to the account by Emilia Ligi, or maybe Ligi. I'll say Ligi. And this is one of the longest ones, and it's very autobiographical. So I'm going to really kind of take a quick skim through it and just call out the points that I think are most elucidating for understanding this character type. So this is Transformation of the Self-Preservation 9. Today, March 4th, 2012, I turned 55, and I still have a chance to share things about myself. So she's living in Florence. She's some sort of caseworker, potentially. She says she sees people every day, children, people with psychiatric problems, individuals who need help bathing or getting up. It's not just a job, but an exercise in life. I have autonomy. I have freedom. Then she has these chapter headers that I'll read. They're sort of kind of old school section headers. You'll just see what I mean. Of when, for having desired, I paid too high a price, and then, to avoid making more mistakes, I gave up on pursuing my desires. Quote, better to try not to truly exist, better to sleep, perhaps to dream, and to show myself as little as possible, end quote. And sleep is potentially an interesting keyword for the 9, be asleep. The memory I have of a little girl, 6 or 7 years old, my mother gave me a disproportionate punishment for having bought sweets on credit at a bar without her knowing. Her reaction to the shame that my desire had caused her was to annihilate me, mostly with her words rather than physical violence. Her desperate rage overwhelmed me like a giant wave, leaving me defeated, hurt, and above all, alone in no man's land. From that moment on, I gave up fighting and held on to the illusion that there might be a painless way to regain my family's love and attention. That's when my successful career of hyper-adaptation began. So this is a sort of a 9 origin story here of some kind of divine memory of harmony and peace being disrupted, and it being her fault for stepping out. So I must not do that. I must not stand out. I must fit in. I turned myself into a machine that remained constantly on standby. If I only knew how to make mistakes and create problems, it was better to stop. So she becomes a machine. The machine does not have a life of its own. It is the one holding the remote control who decides the intensity of its color, its brightness, and its volume. This was how I was before doing the work. I had handed my remote control over to others, parents, sister, teachers, friends, lovers. I allowed them to guide me, deciding what was good or bad for me. It was enough for them to tell me what to do to be good, helpful, and valuable in their eyes. In essence, I was an eternal, little, well-behaved Maya bee, deluding myself into thinking I was loved and loving. I also used remote control on myself. When I didn't really like the reality I was experiencing, I endured it, and to avoid risking the desire to change it, I put myself back into standby mode. Laziness took care of it, accepting boredom. The positive note for me is that in my almost total self-nullification, an infinitesimal part of me never gave up and continued to believe in the joy and spontaneity of the child I once was. From that small flame of self-belief, everything could start anew. So again, like appetite isn't really ringing quite true here for this origin story, and we'll see what else comes in as her story unfolds. But we're hearing sleep, zombie, kind of robot, laziness, boredom, standby mode. There's a kind of this is sort of like the unfiltered, pure thing that every Enneatype does, which is become blind to its own being. And the way that the 9 does it is just sort of like really just pure numbing, pure laziness, pure not looking, with at the same time kind of pleasantness. Maybe pleasantness is another kind of relevant keyword here. And let's just recall the other 2 keywords for the 9. The social 9 has the keyword of, it's funny, the 9 is so like mushy sometimes in my own mind. It doesn't have the same sharpness. So the sexual 9 is symbiosis, fusing with the other, losing of boundaries, losing of selfhood, losing of otherhood. And then the social 9 is, I have to go back and check. Social 9 is participation and belonging, right? This group orientation. Worried that the group will expel me. So I'm worried that the group will expel me, so I belong and participate in the group. That's social. I'm worried that my partner will expel me, so that's symbiosis, fusion with the other. And self-preservation 9 maybe is the core of the trickiness, because there's not a latching onto the group or the other. It's a kind of self-inflicted not there-ness. Let's keep reading. Quote, if I don't know black, I don't know what I'm calling white. I must change position. This egg where I keep adapting myself is strangely transparent and small. What is happening? I feel fresh air. What a delight. So there is something beyond the shell. Now I'm afraid. What if I die? Lord, I place myself in your hands. This is what the worm thought before transforming into a butterfly. She continued. It was a journey of many years. I never doubted its meaning or value. From the first time I met a man, father, teacher, and from the first day I met him, my hand naturally reached out to his. My belly has been the container for the expression of my spirituality. Through the inner child, I accessed a spirituality that allowed me to see things from another plane. And from there, I saw and understood what my material substance and primordial chaos were, and how I'd ended up standing there, using only the reptilian part of my brain. If we want to see our footprint, we must get out of our own way. Many times I find myself like a stranger. Quote, perhaps that little girl, when she saved others by numbing herself, was feeling that she did not love this world, that she did not love that family. And numbing, anesthetization. A few years ago, one night while listening to music, I had a vision of myself. I was a small robot designed to fix malfunctions in a large spaceship. My life was outside that great machine, but I was connected to it by a very long tube. And from there, I watched the lives of the people who lived inside the spaceship. Being a robot, I felt no emotions about what I was seeing, but I knew that I did not want to be part of it. It was better to stay outside in the darkness of that immense and silent space. I feel a lack of harmony. I don't know how to find it within myself. I'm glad I've not completely lost the Dionysian sense of life. What is this discomfort? I can't be unwell. I have to help the world, and supermen cannot have doubts. Listen, I will tell you all my symptoms. I'll give you all the information you need. You investigate and analyze for me, because I don't know how to do it and I am busy. But he says, sit down and tell me about yourself. She says, what should be done in therapy with a self-preservation 9? Give the session a sense of sacredness. Establish a form of contact to close the session. The most effective gesture is a hug. For a person who is unfamiliar with introspection, experiencing it can feel like entering another world where there are no certainties, and the contact serves to bring them back to earthly certainty after a journey to the center of that nothingness they find within. A 9 lives on the surface, and diving into depth is an enormous effort, but they will do it if they know that when they can resurface, already at the limit of their breath, someone will extend a hand to help them return to solid ground. Inviting a self-preservation 9 to dive inside themselves concretely means asking them to remember their life, to remember their childhood, their adolescence. For me, the work Claudio proposed was crucial: to remember through pain, using the regressive method to remember, remember, and remember again. Everything is contained within this verb. Going back in time to recognize that one has a life made up of this and that, of pain, of frustration, of love, and of carefreeness. So given the importance of the word remembering here, maybe another keyword for the self-preservation 9 is forgetting. When Claudio first said to me, "Tell me about yourself," I felt dizzy. I was in chaos. My fog appeared in an instant. I didn't understand anything, not just because of the teacher's question, but because of the first time in my life someone was interested in me. What's it like to be an animal? We all are in our pure animal modes many times a day, when we sleep, but also when we're sleepy, when we're hungry, but also after we eat. After we eat, there's just no room for spiritual work, introspection. How are you doing? There's just a kind of gray, blah confusion. And this seems to be like the self-preservation 9 strategy, forgetting. And I guess why appetite maybe works is because the 9 is probably going to do things to induce that state of confusion. So eating is one of the most effective ways to become confused. But going blank, going on standby mode, as she describes here, these are all other ways of inducing confusion. In the Temple of Apollo, it was written, "Know thyself, but also nothing in excess." Excess, this is the cause of everything. My path has been paved with excesses until now, even during the hero's journey, but I am myself again, and I do not want to give up. The nature of this chapter, it's so elusive, but one thing that I've found, like having a 9 close to me in my life, is like you can't get hooked on the elusiveness. Like you also have to include within the elusiveness the not there-ness. Like for someone at the bottom of the Enneagram, a 4 or a 5, there may become a fascination with the elusiveness. What's really going on here? What's underneath the hood, wanting to really see what's going on? And there is a sense in which the 9 experiences not there-ness. There's remembering, and of course there's a spiritual work, but their level of introspection is so low that other types may have to accept, like, oh, this is a person who I'm experiencing them as elusive, but there's actually not that much there to work with. And I think, going through this chapter, you can see how much of her work is about making a life, creating a life. She talks about becoming clay to work with. So the 9's transformation work in part is like, okay, starting to live, starting to build something, starting to create something. But we other types, I think, project elusiveness onto the 9. Quote, "If I allow myself to be myself, what will happen? What happens if I start not believing in my crazy ideas anymore? I don't know, but I feel a sense of freedom. The experience of retreat is calling me. There I expand. Perhaps I will dissolve and feel myself as part of the whole that ordinary consciousness and mind cannot grasp. I believe an important stage of my evolution has been the collapse of the dogmatic sense of the crazy idea." What is a crazy idea? She doesn't say. "I held it as a commandment, as if the crazy idea with its power had replaced God." So abstract. So like what are you talking about? But let's go back. I mean, maybe we talked about the crazy idea throughout the Enneagram. I think her crazy idea that she sort of points to previously is this idea of, I must hyper adapt. I must become a kind of machine to survive. "I started facing my resistance against life, surrendering more to what is here now, in this moment and not another. And the result is a sense of simplicity and spontaneity. The appetite in all its forms no longer serves to exercise the fear of emptiness tied to the neurotic lack of love. By surrendering to love, I discovered that the emptiness only frightened me because I did not know it. Discovered that as a fertile void, a neutral place." Spacey. The 9 is spacey. The self-preservation 9, I think in particular, is spacey. And so this chapter is, I think, points to, at least in her case, in Amelia's case, even in her transformation, there's kind of this illusory illusion, void. I understand that I'm a neutral, infinite, indescribable, and timeless mind, but at the same time, an ordinary mind that lives and feeds on what it projects through its gaze. Now I know nothing, but through the experience of retreat, I found the sense of, there's sort of this quality. And I guess I get the sense that the 9 will always be despite their solidness, right? We started with the Sancho Panza, this big-bellied, physically present being. The metaphysical piece is, not there, spacey, hard to pin down, hard to figure out. And that seems to be something core to the nine. And of course, all these qualities, adaptability, harmonization, these are wonderful qualities that can be brought into deeper transformation work. But as the writer here says, for her, it's disorienting to be asked, tell me about yourself. And here's a chapter where I don't think I know anything about her at the end of it. So she ends with a poem called Todo Cambia, which I'm not going to read. It's by not by her. And that's the culmination of the nine. I don't want to be, I find myself a little bit frustrated at the end of this subtype account, but I think that frustration is helpful to sit with because there's sort of a wish to shake the nine on my part. What are you talking about? Who are you? What's there? And I think that speaks perhaps more deeply to the keyword there of this remote control. I loved her example of the TV and the remote control. She's handed over the remote control to others. And so if you want to know who are you, and the person hands you a remote control and say, who do you want me to be? That feels more central to the self-preservation nine than the word appetite. So this is a subtype that clearly needs more investigation on my part. Look forward to more conversations with other people to get to the heart of the self-preservation nine. But we'll end there and carry on with the one next time.